What's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 24/7. I am staff writer Cody Goodwin. We've got the band back together again. Mike Rodak and Alex Scarborough here with me. Guys, we are here to talk one more time about a football team getting ready to play a football game, and we're going to get to watch it on Saturday. We're recording this on a Thursday. Is the excitement building, or are we just at the point where it's like, meh, get me across the finish line?
I'm just ready for the kraut in the press box. The sauerkraut.
Oh, I don't
never
halftime dog. Never.
6 p.m. kickoff. Do we think they're going to take care of us when it comes to dinner, or?
Oh yeah, we'll get dinner. We'll get halftime meal.
But like, how good do we think it's going to be? To be honest, it's been so long since we've been at Bryant-Denny for an actual game that I forgot what the meals taste like.
It's hit or miss. I mean, you get some good meals like chicken pot pie. I think we had one time last year. Like it's not just like regular press. I would rank Alabama in the top 2 or 3 of the SEC. Yeah. I've not been to every SEC school's press box, especially with the new schools, but to the ones I've been, I'd say they're right up there.
Yeah, and our listeners will enjoy that. Auburn's probably the worst.
Oh yeah,
it's the 100%. Worst of all time.
100%.
They gave us sandwiches with cheese packaged separately, like the
burger.
Eagles cheese. Yeah,
it was a burger with a slice of American cheese.
It used to be a burger. It turned into something else.
And then there was like lettuce stuffed into a plastic baggie. I mean, that was the worst.
It's like the burger was packing to travel.
Right.
I've never seen anything like that in my life. Which now I've got the idea of we got to rank SEC press box meals moving forward. That's a future show teaser. But there's a lot to look forward to, I suppose, right? We're going to discuss Alabama's season opener against Western Kentucky today. We're going to discuss some of the news and notes from this past week, officially game week. We got the feel for what the game week schedule is going to be like. A lot of stuff in the front end. Kalen DeBoer had his Hey Coach show on Wednesday. We're going to talk about some of the things that we thought were maybe interesting from throughout the week. And then we'll actually touch on the game itself. We're going to discuss the things that we're looking forward to seeing, what we want to see, what will make us feel good coming out of the game on Saturday. Also going to introduce a new segment that involves the video game because I just can't stop playing it. Took Kansas to a national championship the other night playing All-American mode. Guys, I think I'm actually getting better. Neither here nor there. But let's start with some news and notes from the week. Not a ton, I think, that we learned new in terms of like groundbreaking news from this past week. But on the SEC teleconference on what would have been Wednesday, Alabama head coach Kalen DeBoer revealed a couple of small things, most notably the wide receiver rotation. He didn't name names, but he did say 5 to 7 guys will probably see some sort of regular playing time or see snaps on Saturday in the season opener. Throw it out to the group. How do we, not that we need to know who the 5 to 7 are, but how do we feel about the rotation maybe being that big?
Well, didn't he even say, I think everybody knows who the 6 are. Now that you mentioned it, I have to go back and check. He said, we have 6 solid guys for sure. I don't think there's any doubt like who those 6 guys are. Cole Adams, Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, Emmanuel Henderson. And then I think number 7 is Caleb Odom. So I think if they go to 7, I think Caleb Odom gets a little more playing. I think Henderson and Odom would be the swing districts, if you will, of that 5 to 7. If they go 5, those guys probably don't play or play very little. If they go to 7, then I think you start to see a little more Odom and Henderson in there. To me, that's what it looks like.
5 in a competitive game, 7 in a blowout. I don't think you're going to see 7 regularly throughout the season. It's just not going to happen.
I agree.
You can have a wide open offense and you still don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part of me, and look, again, been playing the video game. I like to line up my receivers out wide and just chuck the ball deep, right? But 5 seems like a lot unless they're up a lot and we start to see some of these other guys get a lot of playing time in the second half. Am I crazy, or do I kind of want to condense the rotation a little bit if I was
Just
them?
because it's 5 doesn't mean 5 are going to catch passes.
Right.
That's kind of where I land with it. I think 4 is the max of catching even 7 or more passes, to be honest.
And just because it's 5 doesn't mean that they'll all get equal playing time either. I think
Right.
at the end of the day, you're probably playing 2 to 3 more than the others. And I think there's still question on who those 2 or 3 would be. I think Jeremy Bernard's solidly in that category. I think Ryan Williams is very likely in that category. I think the Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law, Cole Adams sphere is still to be decided. But yeah, I think over time they'll reduce that rotation down. I mean, yeah, it's doable to play that many guys. Even last year, like Alabama had, think of it, like Bond, Burton, Benson, Brooks, and then
I got a lot of targets.
Right. Nyblack, yeah, as a tight end, but you had Prentice was in there, Law was in there. Doesn't mean that they played a ton. Like Law didn't really play a whole lot last year.
Well,
Prentice didn't really play a whole lot last year, but that's 5 guys right there. Prentice, Law, Benson, Bond, Burton, and Brooks. That's 6.
Mm-hmm. And I think even Kalen referred to it. You have different skill sets. So if they want to mix and match and feel they have a matchup they can win with a certain guy, I think they're going to try to exploit that. So again, it's going to vary very much week to week. You just hope if they're playing really good football, you're going to hope that 3 guys just look flat out. Oh, these are the guys we can depend on. You ride them all season. If you're rotating 7 guys, chances are you don't have a bunch of playmakers in that mix.
Yes.
But I do think it comes down to that.
I think that's fair. And I guess I'm more curious to see how they're going to use them, who's going to be on the field at the same time. Like, I think Jeremy Bernard seems like he's this queen on the chessboard type where you can put him out wide, you can put him in the slot because he played there a little bit last year. So when he's in either one of those positions, not to get too deep into the X's and O's, but like when he's lined up out wide, who are the next 2 guys? If they decide to line him up in the slot, who are the other 2 guys? It could be the same 2 guys, Prentice and Ryan Williams, or perhaps Kendrick Law. It could be 2 different guys. I don't know. Like, who are the 2 receivers on the field when they decide to go heavy with 2 tight ends? On a day, he did both running backs, right? I don't think that's going to be the case because of Jam Miller's injury. I'd like to think that probably Justice Haynes will get the starting nod at running back. But if they decide to put both running backs on the field, what does that look like, right? Like the personnel packaging, it's not going to be what we see on Saturday is what we're going to see for the rest of the season. But I am just curious to see what it looks like. What do the early stages of this thing look like? And obviously, we've talked about this at length. The receivers are a huge part of that just because we have no idea.
Right. And I think it's if you have a guy that emerges, like if Jeremy Bernard over the course of the first 2 or 3 games shows that like he needs to be out there almost every snap, then he'll be out there almost every snap. Same thing with Ryan Williams. Like if you can't take him off the field, then he's not going to come off the field. So I think some of that just has to play out. Back to like 2020, Waddle got hurt that year, but it was Waddle and Devontae Smith. And it's like, we're not taking those guys off the field. Like those guys are pretty good. I think if there was a third guy, it was Slade Bolden, and then almost nobody else played. Like the snaps and the catches and the targets for the rest of the receivers that year were pretty minuscule. Because until Waddle got hurt, and then I think Mechie ended up stepping in a little bit. But I think it's a case too of like how much are you going to worry about guys' feelings? That's part of college football now. It's part of the reason why they expanded the SEC travel roster last year by 4 spots, so more guys could travel and kind of get the experience of traveling and be happier because they were going to road games. Are you going to play more guys in a Western Kentucky or South Florida game or Mercer game down the road just for the sake of saying you got on the field, we gave you a chance, you got some snaps, as opposed to a guy who sits on the bench all year and by December I'm done with this, I'm leaving. I think in this day and age, as a coach, you probably have to pay attention to that a little bit. I don't know if every coach will. I think listening to Jamarcus Shepard the other day, I don't think he's necessarily wired that way to just give a guy snaps. But do you put Rico Scott out there for a few snaps in the fourth quarter? Do you put Caleb Odom out there? Do you put Jaron Hamilton? Do you put any of those other guys, Amari Jefferson, just to get them on the field, make them feel like they're part of the team and keep them happy? Because that is keeping guys happy is such a big part of the game now.
Well, there's also a gamesmanship piece. I mean, the more the other team has to account for, especially if you feel solid the first 2 games, run a bunch of guys out there and make Wisconsin and Georgia after that think about, okay, what do I do when Emmanuel Henderson's on the field? What do I do when, Rico Scott's on the field? And maybe they never have to do anything with it. And maybe it only takes 10 minutes of their game planning, but these coaches are hardwired to worry about every second of every day. So if you can mess with their head a little bit, I think you try to do that.
I mean, they're playing coy with the right tackle job, as if like Western Kentucky's sitting in Bowling Green, being like, "Oh man, I don't know Wilkin Formby or Elijah Pritchett. Like, what we're gonna do with
By the way,
which guy?"
wasn't it we're going to do what Western Kentucky does when it comes to the depth chart?
And their depth chart's
Kentucky's got
out.
a depth chart.
Their depth chart's out.
Yeah.
Alabama's not put out theirs yet. I would guess it's going to be like last year when we walk into the press box.
Mhm.
It's going to be sitting there, and winner goes to the person who lined up first to get their credential and walk in.
Well, why do you need Alabama to release a depth chart when Bama 24/7 releases the 100% correct depth chart anyway?
And it's right. It's not like last year when we're all looking for the depth chart at quarterback, and I think they even put like 3 oars last year.
Yeah, they totally did.
So it was kind of like, yeah, this is dumb. But
well, if you listen to DeBoer, there could be 4 oars at quarterback because they got 4 guys who they feel can really throw the football.
That was an interesting little exchange. Chris Stewart, I think, was kind of saying some things in terms of like you have 4 starters at quarterback, and then DeBoer was agreeing with it. Wasn't necessarily DeBoer saying it himself, but I think reading between the lines there, I think DeBoer really likes the room, and I don't know if the gap between 1, 2, and even 3 or 4 is all that huge. And it wasn't last year. Like Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson were pretty close all throughout fall camp in September. Like, was there a difference? And then Milroe became the guy, but Simpson's also gotten better since. So you go from being right here close to being over here, but you're still close. Both of them have gotten better. So I don't know. It just, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but like, if Ty Simpson is the better passer, at some point, if that shows itself on the field, like, do you owe Jalen Milroe the honor of never being questioned? Like, has he done enough to this point to never be questioned? That would be the question for Alabama this year. Look, if Jalen Milroe goes out and Alabama wins this game by 30 points, but he went 15 of 24 and for 145 yards and maybe threw a pick or something, and then Ty Simpson comes in late in the game and he leads him down for a touchdown drive, go to Bama 24/7 on the message board. There's going to be people saying, hey, we should play that Ty Simpson guy, because that same thing happened in the Rose Bowl. It's just an interesting situation when you have, as DeBoer said, a luxury of having a layered depth chart of experienced or high potential quarterbacks like that. It puts a little bit of pressure on the starter in this case. And it was just interesting wording too from DeBoer last night in terms of you have to nitpick to create an order of to make a depth chart at quarterback. And I think he said we have to have a starter, essentially, is what he's saying, but like the order can be up in the air, was I think what he was suggesting there.
I think some of it is, look, what are you supposed to say? You don't want to tell your 3rd and 4th quarterback that they're garbage. They're not garbage. We know that. There's also, I think it's maybe fair to say that Jalen is a better game player than he is a practice player. I think he takes a leap in that respect. I think his ability to make plays is just different from everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that separates him. Look, he finished 6th in the Heisman Trophy race. This guy can make plays, and you have to ride that out until the wheels fall off. If they fall off and it's clear and Ty needs to play, he needs to play. But, yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean you don't feel good about Ty. I think there might be something to the idea that Jalen looks a little bit different when the lights are on, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 things can be true. One, this is Milroe's job until proven otherwise. I think he's earned at least that much. I don't know that he's owed never being questioned, but I think he, unlike last year, I think he's pretty firmly QB1 going into week 1. The other thing that can also be true is another thing that we talked about. This was probably way back in the spring, where if Milroe cannot operate the offense at a high enough capacity on a consistent basis that makes the coaching staff happy, you do have a guy like Ty Simpson over here, who I think we all believe is maybe a better pure passer of the football. And if he raises your floor a little bit, I think it's worth exploring at the very least. I think both of those things can be true.
Right. Yeah. I think it's what makes this more difficult than the situation Alabama was in exactly a year ago is that Jalen Milroe is much more established within the culture of the locker room. He's a captain. Everybody looks to him. He's the face of the program. He's going to New York to be on CBS mornings and get up. And
I think a lot of that matters too.
Yeah. And it becomes more difficult to question that, essentially, to undermine that. It becomes a situation where a lot more has to happen for that to change. Whereas last year, all Jalen Milroe did was throw 2 bad picks against Texas, and he was gone the next week out of the lineup. So it's a different situation, but I don't know if it's the wisest move either. If it's not totally working with Jalen, to just sit on Ty Simpson, if you think, having watched him behind the scenes, and we haven't, but if they think that Ty Simpson could be a better option, if you get into that sort of situation, like, is it the right move for the team to not play Ty? I think that would be the question in that particular circumstance. And that may not happen. I mean, it may be that Jalen Milroe comes out, has a great September, and, he's just cruising to the Heisman, and this is never even a conversation again. But again, it's your backup is not Paul Tyson. It's not some walk-on. It's like a legitimate 5-star recruit in Ty Simpson, who by all accounts has gotten better. Just has not had the opportunity to play. So that's what makes this situation a little bit different.
A discussion that began about wide receivers ended with a 10-minute discussion about quarterbacks. Welcome to football season.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but I don't want to be the guy that's trying to get rid of Jalen Milroe. I'm just the guy that's trying to read between the lines of a little bit of interesting coach speak between Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan on the quarterback position.
Mike Rodak hates Kentucky, loves Cole Adams, and is always skeptical about quarterbacks. You can take that to the bank.
Just ask EJ Manuel.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is what happens when you cover the Bills too long.
Get Mike a game now.
You know where EJ Manuel is now? He's doing a radio show with Jimbo Fisher. So look how far he's come.
That could be wildly entertaining.
Or not.
It could also not. That's why it could. Operative word there. The other interesting piece of news that I don't know how interesting that is, but I guess I'm curious. I'll phrase it this way. In addition to the wide receiver rotation, Kalen DeBoer said that they have 6 good offensive linemen. I think we know who the 6 are, right? From left to right, Caden Proctor, Tyler Booker, Parker Brailsford, Jaden Roberts, and then a rotation at right tackle between Wilkin Formby and Elijah Pritchett. We saw a variation of this last year at left tackle when it was Proctor versus Pritchett. In the first game, I think they alternated every couple of series through the first half, and then Proctor took the game home in the second half against Middle Tennessee. Should we expect something similar on Saturday where they rotate every series, every other series, every couple of series at right tackle, and then whoever performs the best in the first half takes the rest of the way home? Or what do we think, or what should we make of this right tackle rotation?
It's a secret. Look, if Western Kentucky knew which series that Wilkin Formby was going to play, I don't know how Alabama's winning this game. The line in Vegas would move. I don't know why it has to be such a big secret, but yeah, I would expect it to be Formby to start. Like, I think I'll put it this way. I'd be surprised if Elijah Pritchett starts, and you can, do the forensic look on some of these practice photos that they're putting out, and you can see that it's Formby out there with the first team still, and Pritchett's out there with the second team with, Vandermark at right guard. So that's how I would expect it to look on the first series. Now, whether it's every other series, 2-1, every 3, like, it doesn't, it may be a little bit just of game flow and how long some of those series are. I don't know if there'll be a specific plan there, but I would expect both to play to some extent.
The interesting thing to me was that DeBoer said they have another offensive lineman who he's not competing for a starting job, but they feel really good about. My gut says it's probably Gino Vandermark, but the rotation's going to happen, and it's going to play out on the field.
Yeah, I think it's those 7 guys. Like, your top 3 tackles and your top 4 inside guys. Like, I think it would take a lot for Montgomery or Allen or Bertrand or like any of those other guys to play in any meaningful situation. I think they feel good with what they have there, the top 7.
Man, a discussion about receivers turns into a long diatribe about quarterbacks, but as soon as we bring up the offensive line, just in and out real quick.
We've talked about it a lot, though. I mean, it's been the same dynamic since camp started.
One other thing wanted to get to before we actually discuss the game, and maybe this will eventually become the transition into the game. Little bit of news regarding one of Alabama's 5-star cornerbacks, about staying, I suppose, through the coaching change. This is from John Talty, old friend here at Bama 24/7. His new book, The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos. There's a lot of really good anecdotes in this book. I haven't fully read it yet, but I've been reading a lot of the excerpts that have been posted here, CBS Sports, elsewhere. These guys have been making the rounds, doing interviews. Very excited to dive into the book. One of the stories, anecdotes within the book centers on Zabian Brown, who we all believe will either start or play pretty significant snaps on Saturday against Western Kentucky. And it was really the story about Zabian Brown committing to play for Alabama, one of those highly coveted prospects that more or less took the Saban discount to come and play for Alabama. He wanted to learn from Saban, obviously loves Saban's track record for developing not just players to get to the NFL, but defensive backs specifically. And his first day of class happened to be January 10th. I think we all remember what happened that day. Saban decided to hold a team meeting and say, hey guys, I'm retiring. And this excerpt that we posted on Bama 24/7, Mike, you posted this up there, basically dives into a little bit of Zabian Brown's thought process. Talty was able to talk to his mom about kind of what he was feeling, the conversations that they were having with agents and the possible NIL implications. And ultimately, Zabian Brown decided to stay. Kind of interesting that he was on the fence in the way that he was. And I imagine he was probably not the only one. Obviously, we saw quite a handful of departures through the transfer portal because of Saban's retirement. But interesting to see maybe the thought process a little bit of one of these highly coveted recruits that not only went through that what do I do process and ultimately decided to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Caden Proctor had some similar sentiments too when he talked to Alex there, and I think that probably was common, throughout the locker room, especially for the newer guys who just got there and had just committed to Saban. And you kind of go through the recruiting process, and undoubtedly, I'm sure that comes up, and I'm sure Saban. I don't know if Saban was fully committing to always being there, but I'm sure they were trying to keep those fears at bay. And he has the quote Talty does from, Holman Wiggins to Zabian's mom during the season saying like Saban would die on the field before, he retires. And that's even what Terry and Arnold was saying, like a few days before Saban retired. That was a guy who was close to Miss Terry and close to the family, and he seemed as surprised as anybody else. So truly a situation where I don't think anybody outside of Greg Byrne, and Burns hinted a little bit more over the months that, he had conversations with Saban, kind of going back a little ways about that. And I'm sure Jimmy Sexton and kind of the people within Jimmy Sexton's circle probably knew about it. But other than that, it was really kept quiet. And it was a decision where I think Saban too was kind of waffling on as he talked about. So, I don't know if it was strategic for Saban to wait that extra week until classes started. I mean, it helped them in the sense that it got past the initial portal window, but a new one was still going to open. So it just makes it a little bit more difficult from an academic standpoint, I think, to transfer when you wait a little longer, a little deeper into January. I don't know if that was strategic on Saban's part or not, but it obviously didn't make Zabian Brown very happy, is I think the biggest takeaway from that book. But I don't know if there's a better way to do it. Like, do you do it like Roy Williams and announce on April 1st that the upcoming season is your last? Do you do it like Coach K? And I think he did it a year in advance, and you kind of had to benefit for those guys that you knew there was somebody on the staff that was just going to take over, John Shire or, Hubert Brown. There was not that guy on Alabama staff. Pete Golding was not going to be the next Alabama head coach. I would love to have seen it, but it wasn't going to happen.
Some
But
would have
O'Brien was not going to
Tommy
be, the next Alabama head coach. So you didn't have that built-in guy that you could, Nick Saban on May 15th could come to a podium and say, this is my last year. It's been fun. And this guy's going to be the coach in waiting, as some programs have done. So, maybe Saban's just not wired to have that farewell tour where he goes to Mississippi State and, it's like Mariano Rivera and they're presenting him with gifts and a rocking chair and all that. Like, I don't think he wanted that attention. But he clearly was thinking about it, because I think Greg Byrne had said that, basically a year in advance was kind of when those conversations started. So that might have been the better way to do it, to kind of keep players in the loop. But I don't know if the end result would have been any different. Like, I think it was going to happen at some point. And when it happened, guys were going to make a decision on whether they wanted to stay or not.
Yeah, I think there was a sense. Is there a softer word than betrayal? But I think there were some players who felt that, because there was no hint at it. There was no, hey, this might happen. Get your ducks in a row. None of that. And I remember talking to Caden Proctor about it, and him saying he couldn't even get back for the meeting. Like, he was stuck in Iowa, couldn't get back for this meeting to hear what was happening, and had to find out about it in a text message that Nick was leaving. And they're going to feel some kind of way about it. And look, we can sit up here and we can say, obviously, you're 72 years old. This is going to be a thing that you should consider. But these are kids who committed to a place and were told time and time again that, no, I'm not retiring. Has this been on Nick Saban's mind? I think it's been on Nick Saban's mind for more than 5 years. I think it's been a year-to-year thing. I mean, again, credit Talty for reporting this a while back in his previous book about considering going to game day before and ultimately pulling out of it. So it was always a consideration. But you have to understand how Nick Saban's mind worked. He is the most compartmentalized human being I've ever met. Like, I don't think he truly considered, should I retire or should I not retire, until he got home from Pasadena. Until he had to sit down and actually make that decision. And that's why, again, we saw the reporting that he was interviewing coaching candidates the day he made the final decision. So I understand players like Zabian feeling betrayed. At the same time, I don't think it was a malicious thing on Nick Saban's part. I don't think it was I'm going to keep these guys on the hook for as long as I can. I just don't think there was a better way to do it, because if he announces a year in advance, everybody's hitting the portal. And how do you recruit a signing class? Like, you're dooming the program. So do you owe it to the program or do you owe it to the players? I don't think there's a perfect answer.
I think the other thing that maybe stuck out about this, all good points by you guys, Maurice Lindquist played a pretty big role in making sure that Brown did not ultimately leave Tuscaloosa. And we've gotten to talk to Coach Mo a couple different times during fall camp. I enjoy listening to him speak. He's very open and is not afraid to just kind of, say how he feels. And obviously he's pretty excited about where the DB room is, while also maybe being a little bit cautiously optimistic. Just, hey, we still got to see it first. But generally speaking, he likes the direction it's going. This is a guy that was a former head coach, high-level assistant. He's worked with a lot of guys that are now playing on Sundays in the NFL. So pretty good eye for talent. He played a pretty big role. Like, as soon as he took the assistant job after he left Buffalo to come to Tuscaloosa, he got on a plane and flew out and talked to Brown and Brown's family for the most part, just to be like, hey, like, here's the vision. Here's what we're doing here. We'd love for you to stay. And ultimately it was enough. And I think that's, in the same way that maybe Wilkin Formby played a very big role in bringing Caden Proctor back, Maurice Lindquist, especially if Zabian Brown becomes the star that we all think he's capable of being, that meeting with his parents could end up being a pretty cool and important story to, Brown's, early college career, I think, at least.
Courtney Morgan was made that trip as well, based on what Talty told me. It wasn't in a book, but another guy that I think was working pretty hard. I wrote the story, I think, the day DeBoer got hired, like he was already working the phones. It's something obviously Greg Burns talked about a lot too, with having the plan in place to have all these people calling parents and trying to keep guys in the fold. And, I think it's been successful enough where not only that, but like Ryan Williams, who decommitted that night, and then getting him back, keeping Jalen Milroe, keeping Tyler Booker. Yeah, I don't know if Malachi Moore would have been a guy that, as an in-state guy, would have necessarily bolted, but like kind of keeping that core of players together helped. But I think at the end of the day, this still is a big season for Alabama in the sense that you can still, if this whole offseason to keep those players, you can still sell that things are going to be the same, that things might look different, but this is still Alabama. This is still the script A. We've heard the quotes from Damani Jackson and Tyler Booker like that. So if this season goes well, you have a lot of evidence to support that. And I think it helps recruiting efforts down the road too, 2026, 2027, the portal. If it does look different this year, it becomes a harder sell that what was once true under Nick Saban is still true at Alabama. Once you have more data points, and if the data points don't line up in your favor, then players will start to see that. So it's a big year. It's year one. Like, I don't want to say it's make or break by any means, but like there's, I think, a lot of value to showing that things are still, you still have your stuff together, essentially. And Saban's talked about that himself, where it's important to have success early to kind of keep people in the loop, kind of keep people on board. So that's where we are, I guess. Entering
it's a momentum year. You have to keep up the momentum, otherwise you risk falling behind. And oh, by the way, there's 15 other programs in the conference who are going to whisper in every recruit and every player's ear, Alabama's falling. Like get off the ship while you can. You need to go out and show that the ship is not sinking, that it's still where it needs to be. So no, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. That's why, again, we talked about it before with this recruiting class. Whether they hold on to every single player or not was beside the point. It was simple fact of showing this is how we're going to recruit. Mm-hmm. This is how we're going to operate. These are our goals. It does not change just because Nick Saban is gone. You've done that in the recruiting space. Now you need to do that on the field.
Right. I've been asked in a few interviews, like, what makes people most optimistic about Kalen DeBoer? I said the recruiting for next year. I think that's honestly what has given people belief in him and Courtney Morgan. It doesn't help them this year, but the fact that they were able to bring in the number 2 class right now with, Russell and Cunningham and Deere and Haywood and Lee, that it shows that they still have it. But people forget sometimes that this is almost a brand new coaching staff, a head coach who's never coached in the SEC, almost a half new personnel, scouting, recruiting staff. Like, you had a ton of players leave through the portal. You've had players decommit. Most of your 2025 class decommitted. Williams came back. Like, there's a lot of elements here that make it somewhat of a rebuilding sort of situation where you have a lot of new pieces in place. It's just that it's Alabama, and Alabama doesn't rebuild, they reload. So the expectations are high, but the situation kind of fits a different mold. It fits something where you would traditionally give a new coach a couple years to kind of get his new program established. Just as competitive as the situation is, I don't know if that fits what they're in right now. Like, I think it's still a situation where you have to win some games early. Otherwise you're going to have this doubt creep in that's going to be damaging.
I think that's fair. I like the idea of calling it a momentum year. And that momentum year begins on Saturday. As a transition to discuss the Alabama Western Kentucky game a little bit, I wanted to introduce a new feature that we're going to have on the pod this week. Thanks to our friends at EA Sports and Microsoft, we all got our hands on a copy of the new EA Sports College Football 25 game. It's been out for about a month now. Game developers have already even dropped an update to fine-tune some things before the season officially begins. Their goal was to make it as realistic as possible. And one of the things on my to-do list, at least when I first downloaded the game, was to basically go on a fact-finding mission and try to figure out how realistic it was. And I thought, what better way to do that than to actually run a season-long simulation of the game that coincides with the actual 2024 season to see how realistic it is, to see how what the game developers, all the time and energy that they poured into it, how much does it actually reflect what's going to possibly happen on the field, the actual field in the actual games with the actual teams and the actual players and coaches. So I ran the first simulation this week, Alabama versus Western Kentucky. And we can use this as a launching point into discussing the actual game. But the simulation has Alabama winning 30-13. They led 20-6 at half, 36 after the third quarter, put up 400 total yards of offense, had 130 yards rushing. Jalen Milroe threw for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jeremy Bernard, 3 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Graham Nicholson hit 2 50-plus yard field goals. Defense allowed less than 200 total yards. Keanu Coate and LT Overton both had 3 sacks apiece. That seemed like a realistic bar to clear for Alabama on Saturday, or what do we think?
I think the score is a realistic bar to clear. I don't know about the individual performances, especially those sack totals. I think fans are going to lose their collective minds if that happens. But no, 30 points I think is probably the starting point. You want to see the offense really functioning at a high level.
Yeah, I don't know if players will play enough to put up those sort of numbers. I think this is obviously a game where you're going to have backups in at some point in the second half. Don't tell Nick Saban that, but that's probably what's going to happen. But yeah, I think you say 30-13 was the
30-13 was the final. It was only 5-minute quarters, and I want to say each team only had like 8 possessions if I went back and looked at it. So not the most realistic, but I didn't want to run 15-minute quarters of a video game and sit there for actually 3 hours. Like the sim itself took about 40 minutes.
I think holding Western Kentucky to 13 points for a brand new defense with a young secondary, I think would be a win.
It was 30-6 late in the fourth quarter. Western Kentucky got a late touchdown with less than 2 minutes to go. So as I was watching the simulation unfold, like Justice Haynes ran for 100+ yards at like 6 yards a carry. Like I never thought like, oh, like what kind of funny glitch is going to lead Western Kentucky to make this interesting? Like, no, like Alabama legit dominated the sim from start to finish.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously your advantage if you're Alabama, I think is going to be the defensive line versus Western Kentucky's offensive line. If you're able to just blow them up every play, then it's going to be tough for their passing game to really get going. But I think there's all the potential in the world for Western Kentucky to hit a few big plays and kind of make things interesting with that. I mean, looking at last year's schedule, I mean, they scored 10 points on Ohio State, but they're a team that put up 30 points a game last year. They were 15th in the country in passing yards per game. That's going to be their bread and butter. They averaged about 300 last year a game. So I do think there is something to like Western Kentucky having some potential to put up a couple touchdowns. Like that's not something teams typically do when you're Group of 5 or FCS coming to Bryant-Denny Stadium. But this particular situation might lend itself to a little bit more scoring from the visitors, in my opinion.
I'm going to be running simulations on this all season long. I will have stories up on Bama 24/7 Friday mornings. I will include the video clip. I figured out how to Twitch stream so that I can actually download the videos, and we'll upload those on our YouTube page. Going to try and have a little bit of fun with this and use it every Thursday whenever we discuss the actual games themselves as a way to kind of launch into the game. I think it'd be kind of fun to hold EA to the fire a little bit. Let's see how realistic the video games actually are. And 2, again, use it as a segue to actually talk about the games that we will be watching on Saturdays. And that's kind of leads us into the actual game on Saturday, 6 p.m. kickoff. ESPN's going to carry the broadcast. Throw this out to the group. What is the biggest thing you're looking for in Saturday's game, or biggest thing you'll be watching when Alabama is on offense?
I'll play off the LT Overton, Keanu Coate insane sim. I think it is the pass rush and who can get to the quarterback, because if you can't do it against Western Kentucky, knowing the physical advantage you're going to have, knowing that they're going to want to put the football in the air, that might be a harbinger of things to come for the rest of the season. Obviously, what goes along with that is the secondary and how they perform. But I think just the simple act of can you put pressure on the quarterback, and who are those guys that can do it? Is it an Overton, a Jamarian Latham, just Q Robinson, a guy that we've kind of all, I think, overlooked a little bit, but does have the experience there and will have the attention paid there. I think, to me, who can get home as a pass rusher is going to be really important in this game, because if you can't do it now, I don't know if you're going to do it against Georgia. I don't know if you're going to do it against Tennessee. I don't know if you're going to do it against LSU.
I think that's fair. Mike, you agree? Or what are you going to be looking for on Saturday? Like, what's the biggest thing you're going to be paying attention to?
Are you saying offensively or defensively?
Yeah, either one.
Okay. I think it's Milroe. I think it's how the offense looks, kind of that decision making in terms of when are you taking off and running? When are you throwing downfield? When are you checking down? How does that look in Kalen DeBoer's offense compared to how it looked last year in Tommy Reese's offense? I think is big. And what's your accuracy like when you don't have that deep ball to Jeremy Bernard, but you're checking down to CJ Dupree or Jim Miller or something? Are you hitting that?
Cole Adams, come on.
Yeah, it's obvious. Cole Adams is going to be the MVP of the game with 9 catches for 42 yards or something. But if we're writing about Cole Adams on Saturday night because he has like 8 catches, y'all be laughing. But
I love the Cole Adams bit, but Mike, you're sounding a little bit like a naysayer right now.
Am I a naysayer or am I a big Cole Adams fan? I'm saying he's going to have 9.
He's an outlet, man.
I just don't know.
It's low yards per
more than
catch,
50 yards.
Impact.
But yeah, I think it's Milroe's accuracy on the sort of the things, the singles and doubles, like the things he should be hitting. That was an issue at times last year. It's certainly an issue 2 years ago. So that's what I'm looking for, is like, how does he run this against a defense that he should be, very accurate and precise and methodical against, and just move the ball right down the field? Because if he can't do it against Western Kentucky at home, then I think there would be growing questions about, can you do it on the road in Wisconsin? Can you do it against Georgia? Can you do it on the road in Tennessee, et cetera? So, it's a sign. I don't want to say it's like the end all be all. We all watched a Middle Tennessee game last year. We all watched a Utah State game 2 years ago. This game is just kind of what it is. But Miller, I think for me, is still where it starts.
Yeah, to borrow a Nick Saban phrase, you can't go broke taking a profit. You want to see just those middle ground kind of games. And to me, one more thing on to go along with that, the functionality of the offense and the defense are guys where they're supposed to be, lined up where they're supposed to be, and the time they're supposed to be there. Because it is new, and because, frankly, the error in that last year with unforced errors in terms of, false starts, delay of games, those things really shot Alabama in the foot. I realize this is a home game and those things should not happen, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But you kind of need to see it. You want to see that they're operating on a smooth level, because once you get in to a Wisconsin, once you get into a Georgia, once you go on the road to Tennessee, those things are going to be amplified. And for the newness of all of it, you want to make sure that people are just lined up where they're supposed to be.
For Parker Brailsford's sake, do not have a bad snap, because if you do, you're going to be able to hear the groan from Bryant-Denny Stadium in Pickens County. That crowd will be rolling their eyes and be in pretty rough shape if that happens. So
Seth McLaughlin Hive will be tweeting, "I told you so."
Yes.
I don't care if he's playing the game as if we speak, he's going to be having something to say.
So no bad snaps for everybody's sake, and for the sake of us not having to focus on that in another post game would be good, because the last game we covered, that was question numero uno for me to Nick Saban, was Seth McLaughlin's bad snap. So there you go.
The one thing, or maybe the biggest thing I'm looking for, and it kind of ties into, Alex discussing the pass rush, is the secondary. Wrote a story about this. We've talked about this at length. One, just is it Xavier Brown? Is it Deshaun Jones? Devonta Smith, I think, is going to be the starter at Husky. Just how do these guys look? How do they work together? What's the communication like? Does it look cohesive? And then on top of that, just how do they hold up against a team that's going to throw the ball around the yard? Western Kentucky, the last 3 seasons, averages 40 passes per game. They're going to get some opportunity to go up and make plays, to show what they're made of, to more or less practice that communication. This is a defensive back room, talking safeties and cornerbacks, that has a lot to prove. There's a lot of dudes with a lot of chips on their shoulder. You've got freshmen that are trying to prove that they can play at this level. You got transfers that are trying to take advantage of a change of scenery and perhaps take advantage of different coaches. You've got a 5th-year senior in Malachi Moore, who is kind of sort of switching positions to prove that he's good enough to play on Sundays. And then on top of all of that, and I wrote about this in the story that I posted this morning on the website, of all the things that we have questions about, this is one of them. And we're not the only ones that have questions about it. Nick Saban is also a guy that has questions about the secondary, which I think is very interesting because that was the position that he coached. And a lot of the guys that he recruited to this room have since left, save for a handful of the freshmen that stayed through the coaching transition. So that's his biggest question about Alabama, or at least that was one of his biggest questions at SEC Media Days. And so these guys, if he's thinking it, what are other people thinking? These guys have a lot, I think, that they want to go out and prove. Everything we've heard through fall camp suggests that they're trending in the right direction. Now it's time to go out and play and show us, show that you can do it. So very excited to just kind of see how they hold up. I think there's one of two paths they could take here. They could, show that they can handle this and grow into what could potentially be a strength because of the talent in the room, or they could show that they're going to need a lot more time and be labeled a liability pretty quickly. And that could really tank not the whole operation, but if you're a liability in the secondary with this schedule, it could be a pretty rough season. So they've got the opportunity here, I think, to ease their way into the season with Western Kentucky, South Florida, and Wisconsin before they really hit the meat of the SEC schedule. I want to feel good about the secondary coming out of this game in terms of just where do you want to see Alabama moving forward. I'd like for the secondary to be under control, to play well, and to look fairly competent against an offense that's going to test them quite a bit. And maybe the pass rush gets home and we don't have to see a whole lot of it, in which case that's one box checked. But I don't know. I'd also like to see Kane Womack maybe ease up a little bit to see what the secondary can do, to see if they can hold up a little bit. I don't know. I'm not the coach here, but just there's a lot of different things on the defense that maybe tie into one another that I'd like to see, which is another reason why Saturday's game is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently I made such a great case that everybody was stunned silent.
Your Honor, I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I think that more or less covers it. The Sim has Alabama winning. All three of us in our weekly SEC picks picked Alabama to win this game. I think we're under the presumption that if it's anything less than a 3-4 possession victory for the Crimson Tide, that will raise more questions than answer, I suppose, coming out of this game. So I'm excited, guys. The next time we jump on the podcast, I'm tentatively scheduling it for sometime Sunday where we'll recap Alabama's first game of the season. We're excited, might get excited. We're actually going to get to discuss a game and performance coming out on the next pod. You usually don't jump on the Sunday pod, so I might have to save some of your reaction for the midweek show, but get excited.
I might be on a Sunday pod. We'll have to discuss what time exactly. So stay tuned, I guess.
Mike's going to come get his takes off on Sunday now that we finally have a game that we can watch.
PG rated show, right?
I said takes, Mike. I said takes. Get some takes off. That's all we've got today, guys. Like I said, we'll probably be back sometime Sunday to discuss the Alabama Western Kentucky season opener. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 24/7 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 24/7 and 24/7 Sports. We're running a Labor Day special, a Week 1 special, a whatever you want to call it special, where you can get 75% off an annual VIP membership. That's a whole year's worth of Bama 24/7 and 24/7 Sports coverage for less than $3. Best deal all year. You'll get all of our great coverage. You'll get to keep tabs on all of our picks every week. You'll get to keep tabs on the EA CFB 25 simulation that we're running all season long. I don't want you guys to miss it. So tap into the show notes where I put a link so that you guys can subscribe and enjoy the ride with us. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.